Hi, everyone, and welcome to the future of space. Today, we have Robert Jacobson. He is a space entrepreneur, partner with space advisors, and author of Space is Open for Business. Robert, welcome to the future of space.
Hey, Daniel. Great to be on the future of space.
Great to have you. All right, so let's kick this like all the other interviews, and I'm going to ask you three words to describe space.
Well, as a consummate lifelong improviser, I would say my answer would probably at least one of these words would be interchangeable and change out. But what I will give you today, the exclusive for this day, is enabler, inspirational, and ubiquitous.
Enabler, inspirational, and ubiquitous. You want to share a little bit more?
Well, yeah. Hopefully, sirens going by. Let the emergency. There was a sirens going by in the background. So enablers, that space is a great enabler for whether it's our imagination and creativity. I mean, we see all the ways that space has affected our culture for goes back for thousands of years, probably since we were in caves, looking up at the sky. It fielded our dreams, our nightmares. It enables commerce, weather reports, new opportunities. I mean, it's really, it's like having this, it's like having a new ocean. It's like going out there and being taken out to just a brand new ocean. You can start thinking all these incredible things we could potentially do with it. And also, we have lots of responsibility to be good stewards for it. Inspirational, kind of, space is probably has been a theme to inspire us back to when we were in caves. It's just looking up at the stars and sky. Where did we come from? What is this? How did we get here? Are we alone? Are we going to be able to one day go out and journey and explore those areas? And ubiquitous, I think that word comes to mind because you, I am closer to space right now than I am to you. It is only 100 kilometers, or about 62-ish miles above sea level, is the kind of internationally designated boundary of space. And once you're at that point, we don't even know the size of the universe. We don't really, it's there's argument whether it has borders and edges, but essentially it is on a scale so vast and large. Even if you put all the objects in it, all the in between stuff, the space would make it almost everywhere, ubiquitous. That's what kind of comes to mind to me today.
I actually never thought about that distance perspective that you and I are actually closer to space right now than we are to each other. You're in Los
Yeah.
Angeles, I'm in Vancouver. So that distance, like, it reminds me, the other day I was listening to a podcast and someone was telling about the evolution that we are closer to T-Rex that T-Rex is to the first dinosaur. Like for the perspective of time, it just like it shifts your vision and your understanding of distance and time. I find it fascinating. The Can you share with us? I mean, obviously, you've been involved with the space industry for quite some time. Why why going to space? What is it going to do to our species other than inspiration and the fact that now we can go? But what is the human story and the why of going to space?
Well, it's been going on for humans have been going to space for over 50 years, and I think, and we've had robots in partnership. So we have, there's sort of kind of this robotic aspect to space and the human part to space, and there's sometimes a bifurcation. People say it's one or the other, and we actually need both. And by having, because space is really dangerous, humans are fragile and very squishy, so we'll need robots. But going back to the why, space has provided humans here on Earth in so many technology spin-offs that have saved lives and benefited us. And there's just like there's so many, I can't keep track of them, but I encourage people to do is just look. There's a publication that NASA's been publishing for a while. It used to be in print. I think now it's mostly digital, called Spinoff, NASA Spinoff, and they highlight and feature technologies that has been created at NASA and spun out. Now, not every NASA has plenty of things that they have not yet spun out, and people can go to these catalogs and learn about like what all the benefits are, and if they even see a technology that excites them and they said, "Wow, I want to like incorporate this to the business," it's not terribly difficult to get a license and do that and create some sort of venture from that. And so, whether it's medical, environmental, material sciences, there's just so many places that space has provided us advantages. And many times there were things that were kind of through serendipity, where they were doing work and they're doing work on Mars, and they create a sensor that has they're like, wow, we could use this on Earth for this other activity, dual or multiple use. And I think that's the great thing about space, is because it's just this still sort of mysterious frontier that we're learning about, we're still exploring, that we're going to generate all sorts of new solutions and new topics and new research areas based kind of on this mystery and serendipity that we're that encompasses space.
Do you think that from the perspective of the planet Earth, or from the origin of life, life was always intended to actually become multi-planetary?
I don't know. I don't have enough information about that. I've read about the panspermia idea, and that maybe Earth, Mars, and other planets are kind of like seeding each other. There's been ideas of like that compounds came um, traveling through on a comet, and and all of this seems like it could be valid, and maybe it happens in different parts of the universe. I don't know if it is. I think that I've heard the expression "nature has a way" of kind of like survive. Nature has a way, so I think nature in life might have multiple ways of finding ways to take ground on a rock that seems very uninhabitable, and maybe give it a few billion years, but find a way to survive and eventually thrive.
The You are the author of Space is Open for Business. You've been in space for quite some time. In fact, we'll talk in a little bit about your book, how it's basically a list of the who's who in the space industry. I keep taking notes of every name that I'm reading in the book. But before we get there, can you tell us your journey from, I guess, university to where you are now? Were you always interested in business? Or was it kind of going a little bit around and then finding your way to space?
It was definitely a little bit circular. I mean, as a kid, I was interested in business. I had like lemonade stands, and I was fascinated by this idea of. I had I think a few shares in a company that were gifted to me when I was like a little kid, and getting the letters and reading the annual reports, and still trying to get my head around this idea. Like, I own a little piece of this massive company. Okay, and I was fascinated by space very early on. One of my earliest memories was seeing Star Wars with my father, and then we even had a little. I think my dad probably still has it. That he had this little. I don't know what format it was. It was some sort of film format. It was like this big, and it was like the movie Star Wars cut down to 20 minutes, which was kind of cool. It was like the little kid version, and he would we had a door in the house. He would kind of close like it was just kind of like a built-in door. He would kind of swing this door across and project this film. He had a few films, but I always loved watching the Star Wars one, even though it was a lot of ways kind of like a fantasy, but just journeying in space and being in space, it was really great. And so as a kid, I had the opportunity to go to space camp, which was fun. But I realized that maybe I, I didn't want to necessarily go into the military. I realized a lot of people were doing kind of this very. There was a specific path around going into the Air Force or some military branch, and I thought it might be cool, but I didn't think I really had what it would take to, like, go through a Air Force Academy. And then I got glasses, and I was like, there are all these things dings. I was going, oh, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that. And I got really into music then, in high school, and that became just a sort of overwhelming interest around, like, specifically around jazz and improvisation. So when I went to school, I studied both business and music. And being a musician is very entrepreneurial, but I was also interested in just like other things, other skills to have, and other things, not just learning about like opera and jazz and stuff like that. So I kind of I built that in my undergrad, and then after school, I was teaching music, and I went into real estate. I had worked in real estate before, but I had gone into like kind of the brokerage side of real estate, and it was pretty quickly bored with it, and just not it just wasn't very exciting. And I was poking around for some other things to do, and I saw the had heard about the X Prize and was following that. And then I had the opportunity to go out to see one of the X Prize or pre-competition flights, and that changed everything for me. And it just really kind of crystallized. I said, space, new frontier, probably going to be a business around it. I don't know how I can participate in the moment, but I don't care. I'm just going to like dive in. And that's essentially what kind of happened. Was space was this catalyst for me to make a number of new changes, lateral moves in my life, and so it was kind of this inspirational point. And then later on, I went back to the International Space University, and so I kind of did some things maybe in a little bit more piecemeal way. It was probably kind of out of sequence to what maybe a college advisor or high school advisor, or someone in their aerospace sector might advise. But I've I've kind of been one to kind of just uh, follow my own song, so to speak.
And how how did you go from going to space university, getting into the space business, and then at one point decided, you know what, I'm gonna spend, what is it, 2 years, 3 years that you took to write open spaces open for business?
Well, I started to write the book, Daniel, at the start of the International Space University. I had the idea that I was going to kind of do something, and I had been kind of cataloging sort of the different ideas or chapter ideas and outlines, and kind of just doing a lot of gathering, and then end up doing a lot of kind of ended up being practice interviews um, during the sessions at ISU. And then when I came back, just kind of continued to morph all that, put it together, and I wanted to ultimately kind of write a book for myself, as if I were just entering the space industry. Like, what would I want if I could have, like, if I could only have one text? What would I want? And I think I got pretty close to to, to that, what I kind of had envisioned. And what I felt the need was, I actually had spent some time a few years before that doing some. There was a project that I started kind of coding myself. I was learning how to teaching myself about computer programming, and I was building this model for a project regarding talent matchmaking. It was the software I was building, and or helping build, and so I started doing a lot of interviews with people around the space sector. Where were the needs? What are their challenges? And so it. I've always thought that it's good to have a little understanding on, like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Is there a need? Will somebody pay for it? If they won't pay for it, how are you going to be able to, like, sustain it? Um, in a and so you just try to take your different experiences and hopefully inform each other. But once the book was kind of done, it was a whole different process that I had no that was completely new to me. Is like, kind of the releasing and launch of it, which happened during the kind of the first sort of part of the pandemic. So that was a coronavirus pandemic. So that became an interesting challenge to learn. Like, how do you break through some of the noise and have a successful release?
Can you share with us one unexpected discovery that you had while writing the book?
Gosh, unexpected discovery. I think the I think the unexpected discovery is probably like, it's a little like investments. The I ended up basically standing up something that was like my own publishing company. That now I have some of the infrastructure. I could do other books or multiple books now that you've kind of done one, whether it was in parallel, not necessarily me like authoring multiple books in parallel, but um, as like kind of a project. Because sometimes, like when you're investing or look, you might be doing diligence on a business to see whether or not you're going to invest. Say you're going to invest $50,000, Canadian or U.S. Doesn't really matter. But you might do the same level of diligence on a $500,000 investment or $5 million investment. And like with the book, I ended up as self-publishing, but I was putting all these pieces together for one book. But I realized, gosh, I could do some other things as well. Do I want to? Or do I have the capacity? That's a different question. But that was kind of a surprise. I had one friend of mine who I talked to a bunch, and he's in the book. His name's Kartik Kumar. I'll embarrass him for a moment. Most people, I always ask this question. I was talking to people about the book, or whether they're formally being interviewed or not, whether science fiction was an inspirational point or not. Most people said, "Yeah, like this was my favorite science fiction," or that, you know, and my friend Kartik was like, no, science fiction was not really at all, wasn't too into it as a kid, did not inspire me to go into space. And so I always felt like, occasionally would meet an outlier who just enjoyed the pure engineering aspect of it, or the opportunity. And wasn't because of like whatever their favorite science fiction was.
Who was the I mean, you've interviewed dozens of people for how many people did you interview for the book, by the way?
Oh gosh, I haven't even. I'd have to look back. I don't even know the exact number, but it's in the many dozens.
Many dozens.
Yeah.
Did you find that there was a connecting personality trait between all these people? Either it was curiosity or a vision. What was the kind of the unifying factor of all these people?
I think that space is just this open, this frontier that is kind of like, there's, we know a little, there's a lot we don't know, and a lot of people suspect there could be like, they have their own interests with it, or whatever the solution set that they want to get involved with. And I think it was just like, hey, there's like this behind this door, this whole world that we don't know about, and we can each take our own path together, collectively, individually. And I think that's kind of something that people, there are people who've kind of held on. Some people who had these kind of, um, they've been inspired in thinking about space. Sometimes from like their earliest memories. And then some people discovered it. I found a few people who kind of discovered things where they had a teacher in high school, or they read a book and they said, "Oh, okay, this is something I could maybe do one day. Oh, I could have a job at this." Okay.
The Now the title says "Space Open for Business," but really, when I was reading the book, it's about the history of the business of going to space. There's, I think, for anyone who's interested of learning how the business of space evolved and started, I mean, it's almost like a book of history.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful to study some of what we're, where we came from and what we've done, whether it's the history of telecommunications, the Soviet versus the U.S. part of it, and all still, you know it doesn't have to, like, you don't have one doesn't have to become an expert in this, but it's worth sort of knowing about like the roots and where we're going and some of the mistakes, so that we hopefully don't attempt them again. And I have this real, I mean, this is almost a fear that we're really going backwards right now as a species. We have a this war going on in Europe, and there's a lot of other places in the world that could erupt pretty quickly, but particularly around the Ukraine. And there's threats to the space infrastructure, and there's people being, killed and maimed, and like here we are in 2022. It's like, aren't we supposed to have like diplomacy when we don't get along? And like, it felt like, in the old days of the 20th century, it was a lot about hard power and strong power, authoritarian, like, and big leaders. And I thought the 21st century was going to be more about the minutia of soft power and influence. And and I hope that space has been a great unifier. Even I think it was in the 70s when, at the height of, or parts of the Cold War, there was a docking between the U.S. and Soviet spaceships. So we can still, there's still ways that we can work through this, but there's been a lot of contention, there's a lot of tension going on right now. And then, even if we ignore that, even if everything were peaches between, Russia and the rest of the world, we have the current climate crisis, which is all the experts are saying it's now at the moment not about solving it. It's now about mitigation and going, how do we deal with this part of the paradigm where, instead of just talking about a few 100,000 people or a few million people dying from COVID, but potentially billions being threatened, and large extinction events for species that we need to thrive. This is where it's a hope which isn't worth much. That space says, hey, we can be a great force for good and positivity in terms of international cooperation, which has been done in the past, we can still do. And we can also participate and lead in ways to curb things around pollution and the climate crisis.
So space kind of started as a competition, really, between Russia and the US. Then it became a unifier factor with the International Space Station. Now we're getting into a new era, which is less unifying. And we got China on one end. Now we got the conflict with Ukraine. And the more people that go to space, the harder it's going to get to have that unifying um, collaboration. What are your thoughts on these different strategies and vision? I mean, China is definitely, they're building their own space station. Um, what How do you see China playing in this new reality?
Well, and this is some anecdotal things that I've read recently, is that, if there's continued conflict and tension with Russia, China could come out ahead. They're building a new space station, and they're doing a lot of. They're basically they're basically recreating a U.S. Soviet style program, just much quicker. Maybe making some of the same mistakes, but just doing it in a more compressed time. And if for some reason the International Space Station and cooperation on there becomes encumbered, and there's distance there, and there's challenges, China could step in and start trying to attract new users and partnerships there. There's pros and cons to that. Taking a larger leadership authority, and that might also inspire non-Chinese efforts to invest further into space, being more of a competition. I would love for our policy people and our elected leaders or even unelected leaders to look at how cooperation can actually yield an even better um, result and dividends rather than just purely competition. I mean, there's hybrid co-opetition and things like this, um, but I think right now it's probably pretty tricky. But I think if we had some bold leadership that said, "Hey, let's see where's the common ground," because right now the United States does not cooperate really officially with China on space because for a variety of reasons.
You think that that's going to be one of the big consequences of the conflict with Russia? That it's there's going to be a void created by the exclusion. I mean, the isolation that Russia does, and that void is going to be taken over by China.
It could. I mean, but it's also an opportunity for more cooperation. It's just, unfortunately, it seems like some of the there's a lot of irrationality at the very tops of some of these pyramids. So how can the public influence some of the decision makers saying, hey, we actually want for a peaceful and cooperative use of this domain, um, you know so we can improve the whole ecosystem and improve everybody's lot and not just one country versus the other.
One of the things that COVID did was to kind of remind the USA of their dependence of manufacturing outside, and a lot of companies have been trying to bring that back so they're not as vulnerable. As soon as the conflict with Russia and Ukraine erupted, NASA turned around and started to order more missions with SpaceX. I guess one of the unintended consequences is going to be for US to be less reliable on outside partners and kind of make sure that we have our own priorities here in America. What do you think?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think one of the dangers is that you can have, then countries and regions just trying to become little islands and insulated from each other. We had this whole opening where we were becoming very interconnected and interdependent, and there were pros and cons of this kind of global relationship. And now because of kind of conflicts, there's this, oh, maybe we shouldn't outsource everything. There's probably a happy medium in there. But for an example, my consulting partner Keegan, he brought up that the Ukraine is actually the largest exporter of neon gas. It's 70% of the global supply. And so, why is neon a big deal? It's used in laser etching for the semiconductor industry. So, if Ukraine gets cut off, it might affect every level of computing, the computing sector. So that's something for us to really pay attention to, is around neon.
Wow, interesting. I didn't know that Ukraine was such a an important piece of the puzzle. Um, so you wrote about the space industry. Can you give us what are your thoughts on the timeline of first? I guess we're gonna establish really an orbital presence, and then the moon. I think the next, I guess maybe your next book will be Moon Open for Business, and then Mars. Do you have what are your thoughts on a certain timeline for having a permanent presence? First of all, having a stable presence orbital, and then the moon, and then Mars.
Well, we've had kind of a long-term presence in the International Space Station for a little over, I think, 21 years or so. About that, um, I hope if I were in charge, I'd probably put the ISS, maybe or parts of it in some sort of maybe graveyard orbit, because I think just burning it up at the end of its life would be almost akin to blowing up a pyramid. Um, we have over $100 billion that was invested to it, and it's just this amazing technical marvel. So why not honor it in some way rather than just burning it up? And I suspect that we will have other orbital platforms, human crewed and uncrewed. Um, you know, the timeline. I think by 2030 seems like we'll at least have, call it at least one that's not run, or managed by a government entity. Um, the moon, where I think we're gonna we, it seems like a lot of the lunar companies have been delayed. So I think probably we're going to start seeing the return to the moon for the with on robotic missions 2023, maybe end of 2022, maybe end of this year into 2023. This return to all these scouting missions, surveying missions, and it would be great to see this decade that we get some sort of outposts there and start creating a presence there. Um, I think longer term, I would like for us to develop in space stations, like in between the moon and Earth, where you could have thousands of people living there, really truly starting to build these villages, if not larger cities in space. And you could have variable or artificial gravity. You can use the power of the sun. I think there's a lot of opportunities there rather than just getting um, initially sucked into another gravity well, like on Mars. I think eventually Mars will get explored by humans, but and somebody's going to want to do something more long term there. But I'm not sure about the timeline for Mars. I mean, there's like NASA time frame, Elon Musk time frame, but who really knows? That's all. These are estimates, and I would not take anyone or organization's word. You know, um, but uh, that's my commentary there.
I've written, some others have written how 2021 was the tipping point for the space, our relationship with space, and also for the space industry. Following right now what's like South by Southwest, space is really a strong presence. Worldview is over there with their own booth. There's been space. I mean, Rachel, Space Humanity, Dylan. There are like a handful of panel discussions with space. Do you think that 2021 was the equivalent of the 1998 and the computer, where when Steve Jobs came out with the iMac, it really kind of made the computer industry no more of a special little world, but more of a commercial public domain? Do you think that this is where we are now with space?
I don't think it was one particular year. I think it's actually was a number of events that have been unfolding over the years because they all were dependent on other events from previous years. So it was a gradual trend that's been going on for 20 years, really. Maybe some would say longer, but Blue Origin and SpaceX were started around 2000, 2001. Um, so there's like kids in college now, or students, young adults in college now, who were, you know, born when SpaceX and Blue Origin were first being created. I was already an adult, um, so and then I think we have just seen over the past 2 3 years a little bit more acceptance or mainstreaming because of these other events. Because you had suborbital orbital rocket companies that were doing more testing and flights, bringing more interest. If you were having crewed on those flights, there was more funding going into different activities, different announcements. Then maybe things have a little bit more teeth, and because there's a little more backing behind it, or street credibility. There were some great efforts earlier on, but they didn't have enough of the financial backing, or they were given credibility by the media. Great efforts, strong teams. It was just sometimes the wrong timings. Timing can be important.
Timing is extremely important. I think it's part of the success of so many things is just being at the right place with the right resources and having the right vision. Um, I mean, I feel that personally, the technology of rockets being reusable, being able to land upright, was a turning point in making this reality now more accessible. What do you think?
Um, yeah, Sure, maybe. I mean, I guess that's a part of it. I mean, I've heard a bit about like that evolution of like, of you had the DCX program in the '90s that took off, returned upright, and Blue Origin had been working on. I mean, before Mast and Space Systems was really kind of a one of the early private companies doing this in a really robust, dedicated way. And I've heard anecdotal stories that Elon basically saw that before he had the Grasshopper program and said, "I want that."
So you did with that what Steve did with Canon and the mouse.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Robert, so Space for Business, Open for Business, your book now is out. Where can people buy your book? Is it out on Amazon and other, or on your website?
Yeah, I sell it independently. Love it when people buy it independently. It's at spacesopenforbusiness.com or just through robertjacobson.com. Have audio, digital, softcover, hardcover, and then it is available on the big corporates like Amazon, which you stated, and also the Audible platform, and independently through my as an a non-audible audiobook independently.
Did you have to record twice for that? Did you have to record for Audible and then for the independent?
No, no, I didn't. But I had to do a lot. All the kind of the metadata work and pre, I guess, the onboarding with Audible was kind of intense and sort of frustrating many times. And I think it was just not a very low friction process. Maybe because I was new at it, I don't know. But it took it ended up taking like probably an extra 10 weeks longer than expected, 10 to 12 weeks longer than expected, working to get it available on Audible, but it's available for those who are Audible fans. So.
Yeah, I went through the same process for Field of Wild. It's a interesting process where you think it's a pretty straightforward, and then it turns into kind of a headache. Um, Robert, what's next for you now that you have the book? Now that COVID is reopening, um, what's the planned strategy for you for the next 12 months?
Well, I've got the book coming out in other languages, which is good. So make it um, there is some interest regarding. I'm working on a potential video project, which could be a lot of fun. In my consulting capacity with space advisors, we're working a lot with organizations who aren't necessarily taking advantage or in the space sector yet, and we're helping them create a strategy for space, and that seems to be growing. Also have kind of advisory positions with, or I've taken kind of founding advisor or role relationships with a number of other organizations. So I think it's expecting a strong year, and a lot of the different companies are all so different from each other that I'm working with. So sometimes it's always it's interesting to have like the what do they call it, just switching between modes, you're but there's a lot of commonalities between businesses, but sometimes thematically our focus can be very different. So um, just try keeps me really on my toes.
Can you share with us, if you can, some of the companies that you're working with that are doing amazing work, or some upcoming technologies that you're aware that really gets you excited when you get up in the morning?
Sure. There's a company called Darwin AI. They're actually a Canadian company. They're currently forming a U.S. subsidiary, and they've been working with manufacturers regarding their software around helping reduce errors in inspection and things like that. Think quality control. Really cool group. They came out of which is it Winnipeg? Not Winnipeg. I'm just butchering school. It's kind of like the MIT of of Canada, and a very strong computer science program. So it was something that was developed in the university, spun out. There's an effort called Galactic Legacy Labs where customers can go now and they can um, buy different types of archival space through things like I'll give it a variety of different ways, and they can put this data, whether it's consumer or more larger sets of data, photographs, even visual content, text, in long-term storage that'll last for billions of years, that will be sent to the moon and probably other places and other missions. We have our first flight contract with Intuitive Machines. That's Galactic Legacy Labs. Working with a biotech company. I can't really share. Actually, a couple biotech companies can't really share too much about that, but there's a lot of interest around how that could be helpful. Think about it like how they could be helpful for astronauts and thriving in space.
The just on a funny question, if you had the opportunity and move your wife and your cats to the moon, would you go and uh, and go and live over there for, I don't know, a couple of years?
I think so. A couple of years sounds pretty awesome from the moon. That would be fun. Yeah, because then you could become really good at like all sorts of like lunar. I think I would get really into all sorts of lunar athletic activities. Lunar gymnastics would be super fun. You know, although I think when you're hanging out with the cats, I would have to always make sure they're. Wait, would you either their nails keep them very sharp or keep them very trim? Because I could see flying cats coming at you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're gonna have to declaw them before you send them to the moon.
Yeah. Well, I don't. At the moment, I think they prefer, I think they enjoy the Earth. So I don't. We'll see about that.
I did ask some friends the question if people were okay or would actually be against it, but the idea of looking up to the moon at night, when not the illuminated part of it, but seeing lights on the moon, when we start to have people in building, and obviously these buildings will create a light, and these lights are going to be visible from Earth. I personally, I can't wait for that moment because it's going to be the first time that we have a a physical site, like a real site of human presence on the moon. Um, and some people were just like, absolutely not. This is going to be an awful day when that happens.
I don't know. I just hope. I imagine we will have a point where we're gonna even with binoculars or telescope see some little lights. I just hope that they don't that there's not enough of that they don't cause conflict with, say, the natural way of things on Earth that depend on the moon. Most of it's dealing more with tidal and gravitational pull. I don't know so much about like if there's a few extra, like if there's a little specks on the moon and that's like a city, if that's enough light to cause any disruption to anything. But yeah, I think more. I would have more probably be with you on the side of curiosity.
Robert, this was wonderful. I've been enjoying your book. I was talking to Scott from Polaris Down and Inspiration 4. He told me that he actually devoured the book. He just went through
Whoa!
through the book. So for anyone out there, I
Thank you.
totally recommend the book. It is, you learn so much. You really get the sense of who's involved and who's shaping the industry. So, on behalf of everybody out there, a big thank you for creating um, this source of information that is just so great. So, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the kind words. It was good to be of service to the community. I hope people will find it enjoyable and inspirational. So, cheers to that.
Cheers. We'll make sure that we have the links to your book in the comment, and then we'll also direct them to your website if they want to contact you. And you and I believe, will be meeting soon. As I'm on my way to Los Angeles in the next couple of weeks. So I look forward to catching up.
It'd be great to hang out again, Daniel. Thank you so much for having me on the future of space, and and it is an exciting future. Let's just remember that it's exciting and fun.
Absolutely. Robert, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel.